If you're tired of the standard business and marketing fundamentals, frameworks, and funnels, you need a little mischief. Get ready to turn up the volume on the CEO Mischief Maker podcast, where you access conversations with seasoned business owners who have smashed through mindset barriers, innovated the standard boring business and marketing playbooks, and executed future-paced strategies with bleeding-edge tools and tactics to micro-fail their way into massive success and growth. We are Mindset Impact Strategic Catalysts helping innovative entrepreneurs focus. We are CEO Mischief Makers. Ready to make a little mischief? Hey, MKJ here, and CEO Mischief Makers. You've already heard in the last couple of episodes my friends Robert and Kaylee, and if you haven't, then you need to just get your little hiney back over there to Monday and Wednesday and listen to those episodes because we are building on that, and we are going to now get down into the weeds and talk about actually what you can do in your business and your relationships, and through this consulting that Robert and Kaylee do, to improve and actually design your business so you can actually have a life and enjoy that life and actually live it, not just exist in it. And you know what I mean by existing versus living. I guarantee it. So, all right, guys, let's take this home and basically talk about the actual strategies and tactics that people can use to design that business the way we've been talking about. Are there specifics that you talk about? I know you have a book, an amazing book called Tandem, that probably outlines a lot of these things, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure does.
Yes.
There's even a workbook that comes along with it. You can download once you get the book.
There you go. Then tell me how it works.
I think, and this is actually I don't think we use this word in the book, but actually it's just simplify.
Mm-hmm.
Simplify your life, simplify your business. That's where it starts, is look for areas to simplify. And the first part to do, or the first thing to do, even if you think, even if your business is a shambles at the moment, but the first step you can do to create better work-life balance is just create boundaries, healthy boundaries between business and home. I think we shared in the first episode on Monday about just quality of time with each other. So even in the business of business, you have some time to give at home. And so when you're home, make it count. When you're off the clock, make it count. And have these protected times that nothing can distract it. No texts or emails, anything from customers or employees. And so that protected time, and like one of those is our weekly meetings, is Mondays at 3:30. We're going to be having our weekly meeting to catch up on everything and get on the same page.
Yeah, we go over the calendar for the week, sometimes for the month. We just got back from a book tour. So 6 weeks, there was a lot of things we had to say no to, and they were good things. It's just, there was no way we could get it all done and serve our clients and be there for them as much as we wanted to be. So we just had to say no and say, we'll do it. No, not now. We'll do it later. And then with our weekly meetings, we look at the calendar like, oh, we got a crazy week. Okay, well, let's try and go on let's go on a date night the following week when it's not so busy. In our house, if it doesn't get on the calendar, it just doesn't happen. And then we also do like quarterly kind of getaways for a weekend. We've got that on the calendar and planned out, different things like that.
Yeah. So the first thing is the calendar, those protected moments with your spouse and your family. And that's where you start. And now we start to build around it, right? Because otherwise it's just, your calendar just gets filled with everything else. And so that's where it starts. And then on the business side of things, and we covered the time aspect in the business owner's time. We covered that in the last episode. On the business, the operational side of things, what you can start to do to have better work-life balance or greater productivity in your business is start to develop, if you haven't already, start to develop metrics on every aspect of your business to measure, to see what can be improved. Kind of teased it about, people tend to think when the business isn't running well, when the profit's not there, more sales is the answer. And we said the previous episode, it's not. It's how do you become more efficient, more profitable with what you have? That's the first stage of gaining more time back. Because when you're more profitable, more efficient, then you're naturally going to get more time back. And so the first thing to do is look at the metrics. And so because we're both kind of have a marketing, I know MK, because you deal with marketing as well. When you just look at the marketing aspects, just some metrics like email open rates or engagement rates on social media or sales conversion rates on the site, all those little metrics that a lot of businesses don't keep track of. The information's out there, but we don't keep track of, or we don't take the time to keep track of. Then we can look at, okay, now we start to establish some goals on how to improve these metrics. And it's not one big home run we're trying to hit, right? And that's where the problem comes with most businesses, especially from a marketing aspect, is when they're going for that one viral piece of content or that big sales funnel thing that they think is just gonna, be all the answers. Most of the time it's all the little changes you can make that will lead to the big results that you want. Right. So, one of our e-commerce clients, the same thing, they're hemorrhaging money up to, over 7 figures in a year. And so they said, we need more sales. And I said, no, you don't. You're doing $5 million in revenue a year. You should be able to make a profit. So let's look at all the metrics, and they weren't huge, right? But think about this, like a on-site sales conversion rate from 0.8% to 1.6% doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a 100% increase, right?
Yeah.
So whatever sales you're getting and you get 100% increase without having more effort, right? It doesn't take more effort. I mean, it does a little bit to change maybe the copy or whatever, but you're already doing it anyway.
Yeah.
It's about how do you improve
iterating
those things. Right. How do you improve what you're already doing to get bigger results? It doesn't take more staff time. You're already putting money into Google ads and all that. We're not changing the amount of time you're putting in, but you're increasing the amount of margin later on. Right. So so the metrics are huge. It's the boring, right?
But the boring stuff, most of us, MK loves it, but a lot of us other entrepreneurs, it's just not our thing.
Metrics is like a 4-letter word, right? For a lot of business owners. And so, but it's so important. And that's where the changes happen.
So just keep stacking little wins on top of each other. And then it really adds up, increases the margin a lot quicker and sooner than you think it will.
Yeah. So boundaries, creating those protected moments. And then we talked, last episode about increasing the margin of your time, making more productive use of your own time as the business owner and your team. And now as we're looking at the operational side of the business, you really got to establish those metrics and measure it, see where you are, and look for all those areas of improvements. And a few percentage points here or there makes some huge results. So that example of the e-commerce business that was hemorrhaging 7 figures, now finally at the end of last year, they were in that break-even mode, and now they're in the black. And they were 4 or 5 years in hemorrhaging money. And so it wasn't a new sales campaign. Yeah, it wasn't a new sales campaign and all that kind of stuff. It was really just improving what you're already doing.
Because a lot of people are chasing it. Every 3 months there's a new sales funnel, there's a new this, there's a new that, a new widget, and they're like keep changing and following all this stuff around, and it just doesn't seem to pay off.
Well, it can't, because and this is another thing that goes along with what we talked about last time. When you switch your focus, when you change your focus, the thing you were focused on before is going to die. It's going to go down. It's going to, because nobody's managing it. Right. The new thing, it's exciting. It's something new. Well, this will work, or that'll work, rather than just going back and doing the dull, boring stuff, which is look at what you're already doing and see where you can improve. And you're right. A few little tweaks. I mean, I know this in terms of my work with chatbots. We have conversations that go, and we look at, let's say, a quiz. And in one of the clients was a man who helps women find the perfect man. It was very interesting. The man who helps women find the perfect man, and basically all the women that were in his courses just wanted him. Yes. So anyway,
for the perfect woman.
Duh. So he was single, but yet kind of committed, but then that fell apart. Yeah. Anyway, we won't go into it, but it was interesting. So in this scenario, in this quiz, we were asking questions in the beginning, and the first couple of questions were, basic questions about how they felt about relationships or whatever. And the first 3 questions in, we were getting, 90 to 100% click-through rate, right? So they answered that question and went on to the next one. They were engaging with the quiz. We get to this question. There was like 4th question in or something. It was, all right, what's your relationship status? Are you single, married, or divorced? And that question got 25% click-through rate. So obviously they did not want to answer it.
Mhm.
Or they weren't sure.
That's another thought altogether that we won't get into. But yeah, so all we did was, if we never looked at that, here's the detail. If you never look at that, you never look at how those percentages are, you're going to lose 75% of your people on that one question. So
Mhm.
all we did was look at that. We iterated, we changed the question to, have you ever gotten your heart broken? Boom, 90 to 100% of the people answered it again. And then we pushed that question later down the line when they got to know him a little bit better. And when we put it down to, let's say, the 9th or 10th question, maybe the next day, then it was 80 to 85% of the people answered it. So if I never looked at that, there you go. So I build a funnel. Here you go. Have a great life. Bye-bye. Put some ads to it and see what you get. That's ridiculous. It's never going to perform as well as it would if you actually went back and looked at it, check the stats, see where you can improve. This is iteration. This is life. My relationship with my husband is nowhere near the same as it was when we were first together, when we were 16, for crimity's sakes. There's just no way. We have all grown and we communicate differently. Everything we've learned, hopefully through life, we've been able to apply and improve. So how can you, where are other areas? So we talked about, the email marketing, or I talked about chatbots. What other areas do you go into a business and find those metrics that you can actually help business owners impact?
Well, it's an area I hated in college, but it's in the financial statements.
And it's another area entrepreneurs really don't like.
Don't want to look at.
We delve into the things people don't want to look at, but it's so
Yes.
crucial. At the end of the day, why do business fail? Lack of cash flow. There's just no money, right? You can talk about the marketing and all that stuff, which is part of it, but at the end of the day, they just don't have money. And so money management is huge. And so the first thing I do, like I hated accounting in school, but because I have an application now, it really, and I've heard this, and you might have heard this too. The devil's in the details, and it's in the numbers. It's there's every aspect of the business is tied to a dollar sign. And it's amazing. I've heard this, that you can tell the health of the business and what's wrong in the business by looking at the financial statements. And I never bought into that until I started getting mentored by a CFO. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're right. You can see everything.
Darn it.
Pretty much come up with a plan, a business, and even a marketing plan, at least a framework of it, just by looking at the financial statements and looking at the holes financially. And one of the things that really affects pretty much all the clients we've had so far is their pricing. Their pricing somewhere along the line is off. They're charging a little bit too little. And they do this, it's kind of interesting that the typical product or service where they tend to charge less than they should is in what we would consider maybe their flagship product or service. And they're using it almost like a loss leader, which they borrow this from the retail environment, but the retail environment uses loss leaders from stuff that's going out of style that they're going to get rid of anyway, right? So it's either you give it away or you recoup some of the money, but use it to attract people because of the 50 or 75% discount, right? But that's because some of that's already going to be thrown away, but not your flagship stuff, right? That's supposed to drive your income, drive your profitability. And that's what we've seen. That's the one area that anyone listening right now to look at, because I think a lot of you already feel it, that there's probably a product or service that maybe you should be charging more, but we're afraid to.
Well, and I think a lot of times people have no idea their margins and what they're making, the things they think they're making money on. We look in there and we're like, oh my gosh, there's no way they are not making money here at all. And a lot of times it's in the place that you least likely suspect. And they're like, really? That's making money? I was wanting to get rid of that. And we're like, no, keep that. It's like, because if we're not looking at that stuff, you just have no idea. We're not looking at P&Ls.
Yeah. So pricing is huge. And as Kaylee was sharing, what the next thing we do is in the profit and loss statement is look at the different sales channels and look at the profitability on all those sales channels and seeing where the loss is. And a lot of times, as she's saying, it's true, is that the area that they think they're most profitable in is the thing that's actually dragging them down. So this is very typical, especially for a business that's selling wholesale and retail. I mean, let's use that as an example because it's very easy to understand. Retail, right? You get their best dollar because you charge a retail price. When you're selling wholesale, you're basically discounting your price to sell to another retail store, because obviously they got to mark it up to make their margin. So the thinking is we make more profitability on the retail side. On paper, that makes sense, but there's so many other marketing costs that go into the retail side that they don't account for. And their margins a lot of times are less than when they're selling wholesale, because wholesale, they're selling in bulk, even though you're selling at a discount, but you're selling in bulk. And there's a lot of your marketing expense per, transaction is actually pretty low on the wholesale side. So those kind of things in people's heads, they think this is where it is. But until you run the numbers, like we talked about metrics, the stuff that's not sexy, the stuff that's not fun, it's tedious, but that's where you'll find your answers.
Yeah, because with our e-commerce people, clients, they totally, you were telling them it was in the wholesale, and they're
Wholesale's where they're making,
and they're
wholesale's keeping them alive.
they're like, no, it's not that, it's the wholesale or the retail. And then he got looking it up and he's like, no. And then he showed him the numbers and they're like, really? This is where we're making the money, is over here? And Robert's like, yes.
And so what that does is it helps you focus on who is your primary target market and where should be spending most of your time. So I said, you really should be focusing your time from a sales perspective on wholesale, because that's where you do the mass distribution. That's where you get, that's where you really penetrate the market. The retail side, the onesie twosie side, that's more what we consider the branding side. When you're selling to consumer, then you're establishing a brand so that when these consumers, even if they don't buy directly from you, but when they go to a store, when they go to Amazon, they'll recognize the brand, right? So that's the shift in attitude. So when you look at the financial statements, you actually, the marketing plan or the target market becomes clearly alive. When you start to see where you're making your money.
Yes, I agree 100%. My first business was a maternity store. I did novelty maternity designs. It was the first maternity store online in 2003. And I learned, luckily, I was in the very beginnings of the internet, right? Of being able to sell on the internet. We didn't have Shopify's. We didn't have none of those things. So, I'm an OG here, right? And in that, I was completely focused on online retail sales because this was the new avenue. And I just put up the website, got everything ready, and I started selling like mid-November. And by the time December came around for Christmas, especially, I had already sold like $10,000 worth of merchandise.
Cool.
Back in 2003. I was like, oh my gosh, this is working. This is amazing. And just kept doing that and kept focusing on that, and then started going out into the wholesale world, which was much more difficult, right? All I had to do in this time was put up the website and do a little bit of Google ads, right? Facebook didn't even have that. We just had Google AdWords, and people came to the site and were talking about it and sharing it and all that. But the wholesale side was much harder. You had to get into and go door knocking, or you had to go to a distribution center or a place where, especially in retail clothing, right? There were houses that you would go to that you would display your merchandise, and you had to pay them a particular price, and all these other intricacies that were involved. And I just was not willing to do it. I was just a mom, doing stuff in my spare bedroom. I'm like, fine, I'll talk to a few stores, but I ain't going through all this other stuff. I don't have the time and the energy. And, I don't know whether that would have worked or not, but then basically the 2008 recession hit, and I don't care if you had wholesale or retail, it didn't matter. You're done. But it is true when you look at those things and you look at the costs, of advertising, of all the social media attention you have to actually have your brand have awareness. But if you use, basically what you're talking about is piggybacking on the brand that's already been established from these other retail stores, larger than you can ever be, at least in the beginning, then you can cash in on that retail presence and brand from these other stores. Just look at Spanx. Spanx didn't have its own store. They didn't start there. She went total wholesale. And look at the success she's had. So yeah, I agree with you 100%. And then it's hard to change people's minds though.
Yeah, but when you show the numbers, then they go, oh, I get it. Because the wholesale department was the VP and her executive assistant. The retail side had this big
see,
the bulk of their employee or their payroll went on the retail side. And I said, you know what? you might want to give her some help.
Switch some of those people on
And
over now.
Yeah. So as soon as you see the numbers in front of you, that's when the light bulb goes on. They're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize it. Right. Instead of guesswork, once you have the numbers and the metrics in front of you, then you go, oh my gosh, all we need to do is put a little bit more gasoline on this flame and it'll take off. So again, that's also part of that turnaround in that example was focusing on the right things.
So is there one last piece of advice that you can give, again, married entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs in general to help them to really structure their business to be able to get their life back?
Well, it's kind of what we just said, is just really look at where you're spending your time as the owner's time, the people's time, and even just as a business, where you're spending your time, and look just to reevaluate. I mean, don't keep going down the same road, day in, year out, doing the same things and expecting different results, right? The definition of insanity. But every year you have a big assessment, and then quarterly you have a little assessment, but always reevaluate what you're doing, figure out what's working, what's not, and what might need to change, and look at the metrics.
Yeah. And I want to say, look at the metrics, and it's okay to say no. We don't have to be in every activity there is, and our kids, and we end up doing things we really don't want to do because we don't want to say no. We do that in business too. We're like, oh my gosh, we're afraid if we turn down this job that's not a perfect fit for us, then we're not going to have money. And then that turns into a big, huge nightmare. And a lot of times it's a time waster. You get these people that you're not on the same page with. It can turn bad really quickly and take a lot of time and money.
Yeah.
So it's okay to say no and to prioritize what's important to you, your family, your business. And I would say come up with a plan of what that's going to look like. Get everybody to buy in with the family and the owner of the business, and live that dream.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, hold on. If your mindset was shifted, you were inspired to innovate, and you were spurred into action, don't just move on with your day. Focus, my friend, and take a few minutes to visit CEOmischiefmaker.com to learn more about the value that was shared with you today. Please act now and create some CEO mischief of your own.